I'm Leonard Nimoy. Join me for In Search of...
And our name is...
So, as I was saying before I was interrupted, if any of you are listening, we are back after over 3 years of silence. And tonight it's just John and myself. We're doing this kind of on the spur of the moment. We'll tell you why in a second. We're glad to be back. We don't know how many times we're going to be back. And hopefully, if we come back again, we'll have the rest of the crew with us. We couldn't round them up tonight, but we want to. We wanted to. We tried to. Anyway, today we're recording this at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Time on July 21st, 2024. Hopefully, it will get posted during this calendar year. The reason we're doing it is because today, what monumental event occurred, John?
Joe Biden backed out.
That's right.
Unprecedented.
It is unprecedented.
Fairly big
in
news.
The annals of American politics.
Huge.
So that's it. That's the show for tonight.
So I think there's 4 things we should talk about. One is the election. 2 is our co-hosts who aren't here. 3 is aging and death, and 4 is parenting.
Okay. Wow. I thought we were just talking about Biden. I am not prepared to talk about anything else. All right, go ahead. Let's talk about the election.
Well, the election's big, right? I want to know what you think of J.D. Vance.
I think, like many politicians, he is quite willing to bend whatever his views are to suit his advancement in the world. It's worked out very well for him. 2 years ago, he had never held elective office. He became United States Senator. Now he's the vice presidential candidate on a major party ticket. And, if the election were held today, they would probably win the election. But we'll see. From today, as we're recording this, there are 107 days till Election Day.
107. So if do you buy the argument that that Trump's choice of J.D. Vance as a running mate is like a nail in the coffin of Trump being associated with the old school Republican Party, and this is him doubling down on Trumpism?
I think that coffin was already pretty nailed down. I think the question it raises is, and what it seems to suggest is that positions Vance as, Trump's successor. If Trump were to win, assuming the Constitution is still in effect, he would not be able to run again. So, there'd have to be someone else. So one of the questions is, a lot of people thought Trump, after all the shenanigans of January 6, 2021, would be gone. And what would the party look like after Trump? Well, obviously Trump did not go away. He's still here. He's still by far the dominant figure in the Republican Party. And the question becomes, at some point, God or death or term limits or something will take Trump out of the picture to some extent. And the question is what comes after him. But first, there's still the question of what's going to happen in this election, which, again, it's going to be uphill for the Democrats, but certainly they've improved their chances by having Biden get out.
Well, let's talk about the Democrats. So, okay, that's the New York Times I read about an hour ago that right now the polling actually, with Kamala being the candidate, if she were the candidate right now, she's polling 1 point higher than Biden was polling, but is still trailing against Trump. Not that the polls mean anything in the U.S.
Right.
But
no, they do mean something. That's not true. The polls are they are not as accurate as they used to be, but they aren't meaningless, especially if you don't look just at individual polls, but look at aggregates of the polls, because that's where you get the best average. And that's the thing that the 538 has done in the past. Now, the 538, it no longer has Nate Silver in charge of it. The the person in charge of it said Biden was going to win the election last week. I don't know what kind of track record they had. Nate Silver's taken his intellectual property and has got his own
ABC.
site where no, he's not worked for ABC.
Oh, he's not. He left.
That's who he left because I don't know the
Right.
actual reasons he left or whether they didn't want him or he left, but he got to take his intellectual property with him. His polling average shows that Trump was likely to win. And he has a new post out, which I haven't read, which the headline of which is they've improved. It's still uphill, but Kamala improves their chances. There's a couple of things about this that are interesting. First of all, questions about the matchup between Kamala and Trump were hypotheticals because she wasn't going to be running against Trump, so we don't know. Secondly, although she doesn't have great approval ratings, she's not as well known as either Biden or Trump. So she has more of a chance to change that. The other thing to bear in mind is Trump still doesn't have great approval ratings.
Yeah.
He's never had.
Nope.
He's never been a popular figure. Neither Trump nor Biden was a popular figure.
Right.
There are some polls that showed something like 70% of the people in the country didn't want either one of them to be president.
Yeah. Well, here's the real question. It's been 3 years since we did this podcast almost or something like that.
It's over 3 years.
Over 3 years. So are you concerned that like now you sound like you have a potato in your mouth and you're moving a little more slowly and you're not pointing as well and you're not pointing as well as you used to point and somebody's going to come along and George Clooney's going to come along and say you have to be canceled because despite the fact that you used to be something great.
If George Clooney took an interest in my life to any extent. I am sure that, like everyone else with age, I am slowing down. My knee bothers me more than it used to, as you know. I'm not planning to run for president for sure.
Well, but would you have? Could Biden have done the job?
I don't think so.
Really?
I think it's clear from the reporting we've seen since the disastrous debate performance that his staff has essentially been conspiring to keep a lid on the fact that Biden's been having a lot of problems.
Okay, so you're buying that top line argument that basically he's less
fading,
capacitated,
and it's not unusual for someone who is 81 years old to be fading.
Yeah.
And if you read it all, for those of us who've had older parents or have older parents, they say some days he's sharp and some days he's not. Well, that certainly tracks with my experience.
Right.
Some days he's more with it. He's more with it during the day than at night. He gets tired more. I mean, all these things make sense, and it's not. There's no moral failure in aging, right?
Okay.
The question is, if the Democrats lose the election, if they lose the presidential election, the arguments are going to be as follows. We shouldn't have made Biden get out. He would have won. All proof to the contrary.
Yeah.
The second argument, we should have picked somebody besides Kamala to replace her.
Right.
I mean, she's not my first choice, but I can also understand why there's an instinct among the party leadership to not have a brawl at this point.
Well, plus the war chest isn't such a bad thing.
Yeah, well, there's there's a lot of understanding there. I mean, that's a complex question, and she was not my first choice. I just hope she can rise to the moment. She did not run. She ran for president in 2020 and didn't do a very good job.
Right.
She did a poor job, so she have to do better. I also think that Biden and his staff have done her no favors as vice president. They've given her basically very little to do, and the stuff they gave her to do was stuff that
But
was guaranteed to be unpopular.
but that's standard VP stuff, right?
No, it's not. That's not true.
Really?
That's not true. That's not what Obama did for Biden. Or
What did Obama give Biden that
I
was
mean,
so
look, Bush
precious?
certainly gave Cheney a lot to do, at least in the first term. Clinton gave Gore more to do than Biden. I mean, I
Yeah.
think part of
Okay.
it was at least they were trying to preempt the idea of Harris being a replacement for Biden. It's clear that early on, at least Biden's staff wanted, this idea of him being a one-term president. They didn't want that, and they've been carefully planning for him to run all along, and certainly Biden was happy to
Go
do it,
along with it. Well,
even
didn't
though
he
it's clear
promise to
he's
be a
highlighted.
one-term president when he ran the first time?
He didn't exactly say that. What he said was, I view myself as being a transition between, or a bridge between the generations or something, which suggested to a lot of people, given his age, that would be the plan. And I think a lot of people were disappointed. If Biden had stepped aside 2 years ago or even a year ago, as he should have, obviously there would have been a fight for the nomination. It wouldn't have been given to Kamala. We don't know what would have happened. Fights can be messy. Sometimes there's negative effects. We don't know. You never know for sure what's going to happen. But there's a lot of good people out there. I mean, I don't think it's any secret. My first choice would have been Gretchen Whitmer.
Yeah, well, that's my next question.
But it's not going to happen.
No, it's not gonna
So, you know.
But that's my next question. All right, so what can our co-host Peggy Bennett not say about Gretchen that we want her to say?
I don't know. No, we got to ask our co-host Peggy
Well, I'm
Bennett.
trying to lure
I
her
mean, I
back on
think
the.
that
I'm trying to
Gretchen
lure
Whitmer.
her back.
There are two ways, or I don't think these are mutually exclusive interpretations. One, that I will give credit to my son, Michael, first articulating to me before I thought of it, was that Whitmer may view this nomination as damaged goods. It's going to be an uphill fight, and if she has presidential ambitions, she'd rather wait and pursue them at a different time. That makes sense to me. But also at the same time, I think it's clear that the party leadership that essentially pushed Biden to a draw, is also pushing to not have a messy, all comers contest for it to take his place.
And it's pretty clear also that Biden was elected in the first place because the Democratic Party isn't all that unified. And when you're looking for a lowest common denominator in a party that is the modern Democratic Party, you're going to have a hard time finding something.
I think Biden was elected
less
for three
generic.
reasons.
Yeah.
3 reasons. I was thinking about this a lot today. First is Jim Clyburn, the South Carolina Democrat, endorsed him and gave him the South Carolina primary. At that point, Biden was the most credible alternative to Bernie Sanders. The establishment, the majority of the Democratic Party did not want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. I mean, we forget sometimes the majority of the Democratic Party are not serious leftists, although sometimes the internet may pretend otherwise. That's not true. Certainly not the majority of Democratic Party voters. So they coalesced around Biden, and then he got the nomination because people didn't want Bernie Sanders to be the nominee. Then the third thing that we forget, I think, and the key to his success is right after that happened, the pandemic started. So Biden essentially campaigned from his basement the entire time. He had very few, until the very end. He had to make very few appearances outside of a controlled environment. That, for a candidate like Biden, is exceptionally helpful because he's never been a good candidate. He's run for president twice before. He's not a very good candidate. You talk about Kamala Harris was a bad candidate when she ran in 2020. Biden was a terrible candidate when he ran in 88 and 2008. He was much worse than Kamala Harris. So
unlike
Biden got the pandemic was bad for America. It was good for Joe Biden.
Yeah.
I'm obviously that's a simplification of a lot. There's a lot of factors that go into play, but he did win. He did some good things as president, I think, in my opinion. And if he had stepped aside, I think now he will get a lot of credit for stepping aside.
Oh, I think so
It will
too.
burnish his reputation.
Yeah. Well, I mean, but the first text that I sent after hearing about it this morning was, the people in the Democratic Party who wanted Biden out got what they wanted. Now it's incumbent upon them to find a candidate that can unify the Democratic Party sufficiently enough to beat Trump. And I think that's a pretty big hill to climb, but that's going to be.
Well, I mean, it's going to be
if
Kamala
the
Harris.
Democrats.
It's going to be Kamala Harris.
Okay.
It seems like that's already been decided. And I have to say, I have no inside information, but what I've read and reading between the lines, it seems to me that the fine hand of Nancy Pelosi was behind a lot of the push to get Biden to come out, and probably also
Obama.
behind the push to say that we.
The
don't
Times said
wanna have the
Obama
big
was
vote.
too. The Times mentioned Obama too.
But Obama doesn't get involved in these things. That was his weakness as president. He doesn't like the down and dirty politics, whereas Nancy Pelosi
Swims in
works
it.
the phones. You don't think Adam Schiff said for Biden to get out of the race without Nancy Pelosi talking to him? That does not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's also an interesting side note that a lot of the people who were most vociferous about Biden staying in the race,
Yeah.
such as Bernie Sanders and AOC, and there are people from the very left part of the Democratic Party.
Right.
Why is that?
He's the best they're going to get.
No. Well, he's the best they're going to get right now. But also, Biden, win or lose, is not a candidate in 2028.
Right.
If somebody else wins, and it's not going to be an extreme leftist, obviously, then they're going to be an incumbent next time. So the left's going to have to wait again.
So how now that Trump's got the nomination and he's he's the voice of populism and MAGA and maybe anti-immigrant fervor and a lot of things that we don't traditionally associate with the traditional old Republican Party.
Yeah.
How does that provide an opening and maybe a hindrance to the Democrats in this election?
To my way of thinking, there's a lot of anti-Trump sentiment in the country. Trump has never been a super popular guy. Certainly the assassination attempt has engendered some sympathy for him, which is perfectly understandable.
Yep.
Usually that kind of stuff dissipates. It doesn't usually stay, but we'll see. It depends. There's a lot of people who think that Trump gave a 20-minute great speech and then went on for another hour and gave a not so great last hour speech. How much of an impact that has, I don't know. I suspect things will revert to the norm, which is to say there's a whole bunch of people in the country who are for Trump and a whole bunch of people in the country after Trump. And then we're looking at a small group of people in a relatively few states that are going to decide the election. I mean, it was looking there for a while at Biden staying in the race that might not be true, that it might be a blowout of sorts. And I think that's what the Democrats were fearing. One of the interesting things was virtually all of the polling was showing that in the contested Senate races, that the Democratic candidates, especially even some in tough states like Montana and Ohio, were running ahead of Biden, running ahead of him in Wisconsin, ahead of him in Ohio, ahead of him in Michigan, ahead of him in Montana, certainly, ahead of him in Nevada. And I think the concern was, and again, I got to thank my oldest son for describing this when we were texting about it earlier, which is to say, if Kamala Harris can run a credible enough campaign to keep the election close, and we don't have a complete meltdown in the Senate and the House races, then that will have been a significant advantage, even if she ends up not winning.
We'll talk about that. We'll talk about that.
It's a big deal if Trump wins.
It's a big deal if Trump wins. But so talk about the Senate and the House.
Well, it's just
what are the chances the Democrats are going to keep the Senate and win the House?
I think that the best case scenario for the Democrats in the Senate is a 50-50 Senate, because we're almost certainly going to lose the Massachusetts, the West Virginia seat held by Joe Manchin.
Right.
Now, if we can hold on to the polls, we're winning right now. We're winning, not by a huge margin, but we're winning all the other seats, Montana, Ohio, and so forth. If we can hold on to those leads, then we're at a 50-50 Senate. Now, if Trump were to win, the Republicans would have effective control of the Senate because the vice president breaks the ties. But a 50-50 Senate is a lot better than a 53-47 Republican Senate. Even if they have control, there were probably a certain number of things where you might be able to pick off Senator Collins and or Senator Murkowski on some votes to prevent them from doing things.
So if you're not, if Kamala's the candidate and we're not open into the James Carville,
No, it's not going to happen.
open town hall,
It's
4
clear
town
that that is
halls,
not going to happen.
and open it up and have
It
Obama
is
and
clear that is not
Clinton,
going to
Bill
happen. Joe
Clinton run
Manchin, apparently, as we speak, is talking about running. In some ways, I think it would actually be good if somebody like Joe Manchin, who has no chance of getting the nomination, were to run, because I think it would increase interest in the convention. It would give a story. She wins the nomination, blah, blah, blah. Now, that's as opposed to serious potential other candidates who might actually have a chance to the nomination running. I personally would rather it be somebody, as I said, I would rather not be Kamala. I until she ran in 2020, I thought highly of her. She did not run a good race, though.
Yeah.
We have to be very clear. She ran a very poor race, and she does have a lot of, she doesn't have good approval numbers, but choice between her and Biden, it's not a choice.
So what are we expected to see in the next couple months?
Here are the things we're expecting to see: consolidation of the fact that it's going to be Kamala, even if there is going to be some challenge from a fringe. Basically, a party, somebody's on the fringe of the party, like Manchin, by the way, of course, until went independent. So of course Bernie Sanders ran for the Democratic nomination
as a socialist, right?
People forget that.
Right.
The question then becomes Kamala's vice presidential candidate.
Right.
There are, I think, to be very blunt, in the world of politics in America, it's going to be a white man.
Yep.
It's going to be a male, and it's going to be a white guy. I think that it's probably going to be a governor. I think it's probably, I would say, the two most plausible candidates I've heard are Roy Cooper, the governor of North Carolina, which potentially could be a swing state. Obama did carry it once. Hillary Clinton tried to put it in play. Biden tried to put it in play. They didn't win it. So that's a potential.
Yeah.
So that's one. The other one that I think is plausible is Josh Shapiro, the governor of Pennsylvania. We need to win Pennsylvania.
That's who you
have to win Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And he's, now the downside is he's only been governor for less than 2 years. So, although as far as I can tell, he's popular, he doesn't have a long record there. But those are the two I've heard. There's other Democratic governors out there. It could be somebody like Andy Beshear of Kentucky, who's obviously done well in MAGA areas. Kentucky is a pretty MAGA state, and he's obviously done well.
But give me the timeline here on when exactly will Kamala be the candidate, or how will we get that information, and then when will she start campaigning?
They were talking about doing this accelerated,
virtual something or other,
and get the nomination before the convention. And that originally was in play because there was some quirk in the Ohio state law about whether or not Biden's name could have been on the ballot if the nomination wasn't after a certain date. I think that's been worked out. I don't know. I personally think that unless that is really a legal problem, they should wait and just have the vote at the convention. And if there is a challenge from somebody like Manchin, I don't think that's necessarily the worst thing in the world.
Well, how much damage can be done by Trump between now and then?
Well, I mean, she can still campaign even if she's not officially.
Well, that's my
the winner.
question. So when are we going to start seeing her campaign? Because I've heard at least two people
Well,
say to me
I
today,
think that-
"Where's Kamala? She's nowhere to be
Well,
seen."
I mean, I think that she needs, obviously, first of all, there's a lot of very interesting subparts to that. Like, does she just take the Biden campaign and just use that apparatus, including all the staff who were complicit in all this stuff?
Right.
I think that's a mistake.
Right.
If she does that, the temptation to do that, though, may be strong. So we'll see. I don't know whether she can recruit. I mean, there's a lot of Democratic operatives out there, but putting together a team. I don't know that she necessarily has to be in the field right away. I mean, I think we overrate how much it matters. I mean, the Olympics are going to start in, what, a week or something? No one is going to, except for people like us and a few other junkies, are going to care about politics till after that.
Right.
So I think she has some time. I think, she picks her vice president right before the convention, the way Trump did.
Yeah. Yeah.
She goes through it. She goes through the vetting process. She should figure out what kind of a staffing she's going to have for the campaign, and it's going to be a sprint. It's going to be, a 2-month sprint from there. Now, people should be out talking. I think what they should be concerned about is the messaging. And I think she needs to run hard to the center and not worry about the left flank.
She has to.
The left flank is not. She should not worry about that. I think that a couple of possibilities that I think, or a couple of benefits she brings is a lot of Democratic voters were very discouraged about Biden's performance.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing you have to worry about is, before you get to the part where you're fighting over the 10% in the middle and Michigan and Pennsylvania and all those places that decide the election, you have to make sure you get your base to turn out so that fighting about that 10% makes a difference. I think with Biden staying in, there would have been a good chance the hardcore Democratic turnout would have been depressed because people were just like sort of giving up on things. Yeah. I think this will change that. So that's one,
because of the energy coming from the convention,
it's not
or just
Biden at this.
Okay.
It's not Biden.
Okay.
I mean, it's the generic replacement for Biden. Now, a lot of things can go wrong and a lot of things can go right. I mean, let's think about where we were on June 26th and which July 21. A lot of things have happened that nobody predicted. I mean, let's think about the fact that Biden's people wanted to have this unprecedentedly early presidential debate before either of the candidates have been officially nominated.
Yeah. What a stupid
Why
move.
are they doing that? Because they know they're behind in these polls. Although, their spin is, oh no, the election's fine. But obviously, they wanted to shake things up. Well, they did shake things up. They shook it up
so much.
Totally unintended way. Now, Trump thinks, I can beat Biden. I mean, he's not that great, and he's not doing that great. But Trump, I think, was shocked at how badly Biden did, like almost everyone was.
Yeah, it was unwatchable.
And I think Trump actually, I mean, I don't think Trump's afraid of Kamala Harris, but I think Trump would rather have Biden stayed in the race.
Yeah, for sure.
Which is just another good reason why it's good that he got out.
So will they debate?
Oh, I'm sure they will.
They will.
And Harris did pretty well at the Democratic Party debate. So I think she should run, and we've talked about this off mic, on off camera too, for that matter. I think she should run on as a prosecutor.
Yeah.
Because it has several cross currents to it, right? Because she can run as a prosecutor that burnishes her centrist credentials. She can talk about problems. She can talk about how we have to, be stricter about enforcing things at the border, which I think is one of the areas that Biden is one of the issues he's very vulnerable on, which is the immigration issue. Also gives her a good contrast to Trump. Who do you want, the prosecutor or the criminal?
Yeah.
The other thing I think she should do is run against the Supreme Court, although that's a bit of demagoguery.
Talk about that. Let's hear about that.
And,
How would that happen?
personally
How would that
agree
play
with
out?
it. I think it'll be effective.
Oh yeah, I think so too. How will that work?
The best issue for the Democrats since 2022 has been
Abortion.
the Roe, the reproductive rights stuff. So she should certainly hit that note, but she should also broaden it and talk about Trump appointing the judges who overturn Roe. But Trump also, I think, for example, she can make a big deal about the immunity decision. That's not the kind of thing that is easily understood.
Yeah, how will she make a big deal out of that in a way that's
Well, I'll tell
meaningful
you
in the
one thing
election?
she could do. You know what she could do at the debate? Or she could say this at the convention in her acceptance speeches. Talk about how bad the decision is, makes a king. We don't want a king, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then she could say, if I'm elected president, I'll waive my immunity. I don't mind being held accountable. And I challenge Trump to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, legally speaking, that's
It's
probably
irrelevant.
meaningless.
Right.
You probably can't waive that kind of immunity. But I think it would work as a political thing, or at least it's worth a shot.
And you think that resonates with a middle of
Well,
a
I think
a swing
that's the
voter?
kind of thing that'll grab people's attention, even if they're not paying careful attention to the nuances of the discussion. And I mean, look, there's a lot of people who were not going to vote for Biden, but are not crazy about Trump. And so you're trying to get those people.
Yeah.
And you're trying to say, yeah, she's a prosecutor, blah, blah, blah. A lot of those people are not. The other big issue, of course,
right
the Democrats are vulnerable on is inflation. And for that, I would say the demagoguery is she should say she's going to go after the big corporations for keeping prices high and inflating their profits and use the tools of the government.
Does she even need to do
Honestly,
that
that's
though?
not that different from what Vance has been saying.
Right, exactly. That's what I'm saying. Does she even need to go there? Because is that even a differentiator?
She should go there because I think it undercuts some of the populist thing and tries to get it on there. And she needs to look. All vice presidents who run for president are stuck to some extent with the president's record.
Yes.
But what she needs to do, like all vice presidents who want to win, is she needs to emphasize the popular stuff, the infrastructure stuff, and all that jazz. And we got through COVID and all that. And she needs to make a distinction, draw a line around the unpopular stuff, and say she's going to do things a little bit different. She loves Joe Biden, but she's going to do things. You are not old enough to remember this, but in 1968, when Hubert Humphrey was the Democratic nominee, and he was way behind in the polls, he gave a speech a televised speech saying he would do things a little bit differently. He would halt the bombing in order to advance the peace process, which was a break with President Johnson's policy. That was the point at which the campaign turned around, and he very nearly beat Nixon. He came very close. Now he was helped by the fact there was a third party drawing votes that probably would have largely gone to Nixon in the race, but that was going to happen anyway. But he was well down in the polls, and he came very close. So she needs to indicate that she's going to, she doesn't have to, stick her middle finger up in Joe Biden's face, and she has to speak highly of him. But at the same token, she can make clear she would do things a little differently. The two areas where I think she needs to talk about are the border and inflation. Those are the two things.
Well, inflation,
where the Democrats are most vulnerable.
So inflation also, how is she going to talk about, how can she talk about something that really distinguishes her, I don't know, distinguishes
she needs,
from
that's
Trump.
where I think the argument is that we should fight against the corporations making the money while we're all being hurt by inflation. I mean, look, the honest truth of the matter is, except for possibly bringing the budget in balance, which is, you're not going to do in a year.
Right.
I mean, she could take an argument that we need to think more about budget balancing, no more tax cuts for the rich, blah, 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 that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That's okay, too.
Yeah.
I don't think that the message is not me. But I think that, look, the fact of the matter is the Federal Reserve has done a good job bringing inflation under control without causing a recession. So they should be praised for that. They have more to do with it than really what the president does. Now, Biden's mistake was, frankly, not recognizing inflation right away, not speaking to it, poo-pooing it initially. So it created, there may be not much he could have done, but he could have tried to get in front of that story, and he didn't. He got behind that.
Yeah.
And that was a mistake. And, he's reaping the stuff for that. But again, she should try to take credit for the stuff that's popular and try to distance herself from the stuff that's unpopular.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not brain surgery.
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
very
yeah.
simple. But it's not, it's easier said than done, but there are things she can say. But I mean, she's got an unpopular opponent. That helps. There's a lot of people that don't want to vote for Trump.
Yeah.
There's a lot
She
of
can
people,
run to the center and definitely pull a lot over if she does it right.
That's the trick. Look, she doesn't. What she needs to do is win Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. She needs to win those three.
Yeah.
She can lose Arizona. She can lose Nevada. Even she can lose Georgia.
Yeah.
I mean, she'd like to try to win all those states.
Yeah.
But she can't start. But I mean, we're looking at Biden possibly losing Maine and New Hampshire and Virginia, in addition to all of those states. So, I mean, I think that. I mean, it's also true that her presence on the ticket probably helps boost at least the turnout of African American voters, and that is important.
Yeah. How old is she?
She is, I want to say, 60.
I was going to say she's not a.
She's not 80.
She's not 80. Right.
I mean, Trump is 78. I mean, we also forget
59
sometimes. Although the
She's
Biden campaign has
59.
been trying to remind us, Trump is not a spring chicken himself.
Right. So if Kamala is 59, she's what generation is she?
Well, she would be
She's a boomer still. She's still a
is it
boomer.
59? When was she born? 64, I thought.
I just did a quick Google search. 59, 4 hours ago. Yeah. She's
When was
22 years younger than the 81-year-old Biden.
Well, she was born in the. Okay,
pretty
well,
amazing.
not to be tendentious, the baby boom, unlike all these other generations, is actually a real demographic thing, right? There really was a baby boom,
Yeah. It actually happened.
and it lasted from late in 1945
To
until
66.
about middle of 1964.
64. Okay.
So technically, depending on what part of 64 she is, she's on the border between the baby boom.
Gen X.
She's either a very late baby boomer or a very early Gen Xer, depending on where she's born.
Okay, good.
But obviously, in a sociological perspective, I doubt that the experience of people born in January 1964 is really that much different from the people.
Yeah, but it's fun to talk about. And I'm wondering
fun to
if
talk
she
about.
could
But
turn out some Gen X voters.
when you get to the edges there, the experience of someone who's born in 1956, like I was, which is almost the peak of the baby boom, was probably different from somebody born in 1946 or somebody born in 1964. I mean, there's some commonality, certain. But for example, she's not old enough to remember the Beatles, and I do remember the Beatles on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right,
I mean, I was
right,
a kid,
right,
a little kid,
right.
but I do remember that.
Right.
So that was a big deal. She doesn't remember the Kennedy assassination, and that was a big deal.
Right.
I don't know if she even remembers Martin Luther King or Bobby Kennedy, because she would have been.
She'll be like
4
me.
years
The
old.
Berlin Wall will be a big deal. One of those milestones.
Right, you're only 2 years younger than her.
2 years
so
younger.
I mean, she's probably very similar sociological experience. Now, of course, she's an African American. That's everybody
grew up in
has
California, in Berkeley. I mean, it's a different world.
A lot of different. I mean, she's also an Asian American too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, remember that. Mm-hmm. So she had her own unique experiences. We shall see.
That's why I'm trying to figure out how she's going to introduce herself in this process to the American people.
I think that is why I would wait and have the convention. Wait till the Olympics are over. You have the convention. That's the traditional way when the candidate rolls out. That's what you should do. And then she has a
Okay.
platform there. She'll have an audience. It's not like it was in the old days, but there's still a lot of people, relatively speaking, on one given night turn in, and that's her chance. And so she's got to think. And I think that what she wants to do is enter herself as very much as a centrist, very much a law and order person, if I can use that term.
Yep.
Which is also, I think, important because
Yep.
you want to make the contrast with Trump.
Yep. Yep.
It's very hard for Trump, except for, obviously among his most rabid partisans, it doesn't matter what he says or does. But among those people we're arguing about in the middle,
Yep.
it's very hard for Trump to present himself as a law and order guy.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, at this point, it's hard for him to present himself as anything other than mercurial or, kind of a force of random craziness.
Right. So that's the other thing. Now, the other thing is, we'll have to see. I mean, obviously, that's important. So I think she has some time. I don't think she needs to rush. I mean, I think part of the problem of her 2020 campaign was that it felt like she was going in a lot of different directions at once, and she didn't really. I think, she should take advantage of the fact and not necessarily try to do everything tomorrow, but, do the time to prepare and have a well-structured, well-themed campaign ready to roll out. And then really, the oldest saying is that most people don't pay attention to the election till Labor Day.
And I've heard
and that's probably true.
The James Carville article stuck in my head, but also my brother mentioned to me that
your brother, quite a leftist himself.
The thing the Democrats have to avoid is Trump getting up and saying like, the dark rooms of the Democratic Party are the ones who are doing all these decisions, and this isn't the American people, and this isn't what you want, and this is what we told you is the problem.
Having at the convention. I mean, first of all, people have been getting nominated at conventions for, literally 100 and some years. She was the vice president, so it's not like they plucked her out of security. So if the president, if Biden, God forbid, had passed away, she would have succeeded him. So it's not.
Why didn't he just step down midterm?
Bridge too far. I mean, thank God he stepped aside. Until yesterday, I didn't think he was going to step.
I didn't either.
But yesterday, it looked like the tea leaves were finally reading that he was. And I have a text to prove that I said yesterday that I texted our friend Beth and another friend and told them I think he looks like he's going to step aside. So I was at least 24 hours.
What was that? What evidence do you have, or did you have?
I think that it was clear to me then, or in my opinion,
the crescendo
Pelosi was orchestrating. And Nancy Pelosi,
she's older than him.
Well, but she had the good sense to step aside. I personally thought when she decided to do that and not be the Democratic leader anymore, that was her own subtle way of maybe sending a signal 2 years ago. Clearly, she's more capable than he is at this point, and people age differently. But I mean, she clearly is, in a more just world, Nancy Pelosi would have been president, not Joe Biden.
Yeah.
She's clearly a much more capable person and always has been, let's be honest. Yeah. Joe Biden was never a great United States senator. Everybody liked him, but he was always a very mediocre guy.
Yeah.
I know people are going to get upset about that.
Do you want to email to insearchofanargument.com?
That's fine. If somebody actually listens, if there are enough people listening to get upset about this,
we're very happy about that. Yeah, hence the reason why.
It'll be amazing.
People say stupid things obnoxiously on podcasts for exactly that reason. So let's avoid that.
All right. Not saying a stupid thing.
No, it's not, Jim. It's always wise. This is
people like him, and that's not, that is, that's a quality that's good to have if you're a politician, but he's never particularly great United States senator. He's the kind of people that people like Chris Matthews think should be president, because they're the kind of people that think Tip O'Neill was the greatest speaker of all time. And he wasn't. He was, what did Tip O'Neill ever achieve? Except, tell a lot of great stories. I mean, he was a great raconteur.
Was he the all politics are local guy?
Yeah. But,
That's repeated a lot these days.
But I mean, Nancy Pelosi actually, under very difficult circumstances, achieved a lot as Speaker.
She did, no question.
Whereas Tip O'Neill achieved nothing.
So why is she keeping her hands in the fire and Obama's not?
She cares about
She cares about it.
I mean, I thought Obama was great. I'm a very big fan of Obama's, but let's be honest. Obama, his biggest failing as president was he never wanted to get down and dirty in the politics of things.
He could have pushed through a lot more than he did push through. He could have gotten.
He didn't like to get down, and honestly, Pelosi. There's no Affordable Care Act without Nancy Pelosi.
Right, for sure.
But he didn't like the backslapping. Whereas that's the kind of thing like Bill Clinton loves doing that stuff.
Yeah.
But Obama never wanted to do that stuff. He never was, and he never comfortable doing it. It's not his thing.
Yeah.
There's a part of him that's the law professor that doesn't want to.
No. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm saying this in the context of saying I like Obama and I thought he was a good president. But I mean, if that's his shortcoming.
I agree.
That's not.
Yeah, I agree.
He's never wanted to. He's never wanted to or been good at doing that. Whereas Nancy Pelosi, that's what the Speaker of the House does.
Does he still have that house on Martha's Vineyard, or did they move somewhere else now?
I don't know. Beth will be up there in Martha's Vineyard.
Yeah, we got to check with her. She's going to be on next
Check
time.
it out. She's
We
going to
gotta
be our
decide
Martha's
how
Vineyard
soon we're going to be doing this.
correspondent.
Yeah, she's going to be getting this. She's going to listen to this on Martha's Vineyard tomorrow. She can walk over to the.
I don't know.
Walk
Is it going
over
to
to
be
the
out
Obama's
tomorrow,
house.
John? Are we going to post
Surely
it?
will. She has to walk over to the Obama's house and knock on their door and check in to make sure.
Here?
Yeah, see if they're still
Why
there.
didn't you take a more active role? I mean, I just don't think it's in his nature. Plus, there was some reporting that irrationally Biden resents Obama.
Oh, that's reported everywhere.
Now, if Obama had not plucked him and made him vice president, Joe Biden would be right now selling French fries in Rehoboth Beach full time because, there was no way he was ever going to be president if Biden. He ran for president twice and he didn't come close because he's a terrible candidate.
Yeah.
If he hadn't been vice president, and the vice president was the pick of Obama, and Obama picked him because he liked him, because everybody likes him, and he needed a white guy.
Well, everybody I've talked to
he needed somebody who had the patina of experience, and Joe Biden had been in the Senate at that point for 36 years.
Sure. Everybody I've talked to who has been on the, has been talking about Biden stepping down and some wanting more and wanting less. Not one has been like, I want the vice president to be president. But it seemed obvious to me from the beginning. I'm like, if it's going to happen, that's the only chance the Democrats have of sticking together.
Clearly, if Biden had stepped aside a year or two ago, it wouldn't have
Different
happened.
story.
Kamala would have had some advantages, but there would have been other serious candidates in the race.
Yes.
And she would have had, and honestly, even if she ended up with the nomination, going through that experience would have probably been good for her.
Yeah.
But we can't do anything about it.
Yeah, no,
it's gone.
No, fair enough.
I believe it was Santayana who said, "Not even God can change the past."
Santana?
No. Carlos Santana.
Santana.
George Santayana, the great Spanish philosopher.
Yeah. I love it. So let's move toward closing out. Let's talk a little bit about what our listeners should expect from this podcast.
I don't know. Are we going to do this? I hope we do this again before 3 years are up.
Oh no, we're going to do it all the time. But the
okay,
is,
you heard it.
We be doing?
You heard it here.
What should we be doing? What do they want to hear?
I think the next episode, if possible, we should try to get all 5 of us together.
Yeah.
And we should spend the time. I would just like to have an episode where we talk about what we've been doing for the past 3 years.
Well, that's what I feel like is critical because we got to catch up. I mean, I have a house.
I know a lot has happened in all of our lives, and I think we should talk about
Yeah.
that.
Hence the
And
aging
then I
and
think
death
we can
conversation.
have some guests.
Okay,
Again, you know?
okay. So we
But, I
so
mean,
we
you
like
know,
our
we
old
don't have to-
format. We're good with it. We're kind of sticking with it. That's
Well,
nice.
I don't know that we have to do everything we did on the
Okay.
old format.
Okay.
We
Ooh,
don't
you heard it
necessarily
there.
have to do all the suggestions at the end.
Okay. All right. I was
I
okay.
don't think we need to do that.
Okay.
But I'm open to discussion.
Okay.
I'm not laying down any other requirements.
No rules. All right. Well, we got it.
I'm just simply
Where
saying,
does
if
a good
you ask-
idea come from?
I have lots of things. Now, while we were off, my youngest son Will kept threatening to start his own podcast with me, which was going to be called something, The Old Man and the something. I can't remember.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Guess who was going to play the old man?
He was. He was going to play the old.
No,
man.
I don't think so. Actually,
It's good role play.
yes. Yeah, no, I think, but yeah, there's lots of people I would love to talk to.
Okay. Well, so
I'd love to know updates on some of our guests.
well, that's what I was thinking. I actually thought
I
there are
mean,
a couple of
we
our
haven't
guests.
talked to a lot. I mean, you know, that would be interesting too, right?
There are a couple of
Maybe to have some of our guests come back and update.
for sure. There are a couple of our guests who I think would be particularly useful in these early stages of discussing what we should be discussing a little bit more. So I'd be game for having them on as well.
Absolutely, I would love to do that.
Well, this is great. Well, thanks, Jim. This
I
was
agree.
good. I'm gonna...
Also, if we can get him, Beth has a good friend who actually works as a consultant and a pollster.
tomorrow.
So,
He's on tomorrow.
if he will do it, I don't know if he'll do it.
Well, I got to tell you, this is
Beth to recruit.
having Biden out of the race is motivational. It is. It feels like an inflection
made
point.
this Sunday in July a more interesting day. The Sunday in the dog days of July a more interesting day.
For sure. Absolutely.
Okay.
All right. So take us out, Jim.
See you in 3 years, John. No, I hope not. I hope we're back soon. I hope there are a few people listening and enjoying this. I have missed doing this, and I hope we're going to do it more often. Bye, John.
All right. Take care. Thanks. See ya.